Welcome to Nonprofit Nerd Impact Unleashed. Get ready to dive into the world of nonprofits, where the nerdy passion and unstoppable dedication of those making a real impact is celebrated. Together with your host, Jarrett Ransom, the inspiring stories and game-changing strategies of nonprofit leaders will be explored. Join us to unravel the mysteries of successful fundraising, uncover the secrets to effective advocacy, and nerd out over innovative approaches to solving social challenges. Nonprofit Nerd Impact Unleashed is your go-to podcast for no-nonsense discussions with real-life superheroes of the nonprofit sector. Get ready to unleash your inner nerdiness and discover or rediscover how to change the world together. Now let's dive in and embrace the power of our nerdy side.
Hey there, friends. Today, I'm bringing you my conversation with Tim Lockie. Tim and we met several years ago, and since then, I have really enjoyed his vulnerable shares on social media platforms and truly how he shows up in our nonprofit space. In this conversation, Tim opens up and shares from a place of authenticity, and I think you're really going to like what he has to share with us today. And of course, a big shout out of gratitude to this season's podcast sponsors. Thank you to Fundraising Academy at National University, Nonprofits HQ, and Chazen & Company. Your support in these conversations are greatly appreciated. Well, hey, Tim, I'm so grateful to have you today for this conversation. I think you and I met on LinkedIn, right? Which is, I want to say, the professional matchmaking platform, but I'm thrilled to have you on today's conversation. I feel like you and I often, not always, but often share from a very personal place in very professional settings. So thrilled to have you with me in this conversation.
Thanks. It's so great to talk about this. And I don't remember when we met, but I'm glad we did, because every conversation I have with you, I feel better about at the end. I feel like, wow, that was good. That was a real connection. So I appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, I too appreciate that. And you were someone that I'm like, man, I wish we lived closer. I know, it's like, I want to talk to you more, but I know we've got some good information, some good dialogue to share and put in some of our listeners' ears today. So I like to start off with this question, Tim, and it's really, like, what are some of the names that you go by? Obviously, I've already called you Tim, but I like to ask this question because it's like, who are you? And this is an open question, like, who are you? What are the names? Just share away.
Yeah. Okay. So I have this nickname that my mom's side of our extended family just started calling me when I was a kid. I have no idea where it came from, but they call me Tadpole. Like, yeah, no. So Tadpole is to that whole side of the family. Like, that is, my siblings would get Christmas presents with their real names on it, and then mine would say Tadpole. I literally think some of them don't know my actual name. So,
That's fantastic.
so Tadpole is one of them. And Tim is obviously the most common name. It's short for Timothy, though. And so Timothy is kind of my full given name. My kids, though, this is really on point for me. My kids started calling me Database when they were really little. I don't feel like we prompted them to. I feel like there was the mothership and the database, and
Yeah.
that was my wife and I. So so Database is one of my favorite names because it is what I love doing, and it is from people that I love, which are my kids.
Yeah.
So there are some of the names. There's probably others that people call me I don't even know and can't repeat on here. So I'm sure those come up.
Yeah. And some we probably don't even want to know, like you said, like we might not know them, but we also might not want to know
No,
them. I
totally
want to
good.
dive into database, right? Because most people are listening to us. Some of you might find us on YouTube as well, where you can see this phenomenal logo, which I remember when you unveiled this logo, Human Stack, right? Like, tell us the connection now between database and who you are in the professional world and what you do.
So I worked in technology and in nonprofits for a long time, 30 years in nonprofits, 20 years in technology, and over 15 years as an entrepreneur. The first 10 years of that entrepreneurship, I was literally setting up CRM databases for nonprofits. Really liked the work. I felt good about it. And then in 2019, I went to a Salesforce partner conference, and I'd scaled my business up to being a premier partner. And in that summit, somebody put a slide up that said 90% of organizations collect data, but only 5% use that data to make decisions. And it just gutted me, because who cares if you collect data? Nobody's really that interested in collecting data. What they really want to do is have different outcomes. They want to see that data transformed into impact. And I knew right away that was true and wrong, right? So I pivoted at that point to the human stack. Well, a couple of years later, I came up with the name human stack, because I wanted to connect two ideas with that. One is that tech is about people, and that people are part of the information system. It's not tech and then people. It's people are actually part of the information systems. And then the second one, it was stack, because we don't think about how we use technology as a community. For example, we talk a lot about user experience, UX, but I've never seen anybody talk about CX, which is community experience. And that's actually more important, because where technology breaks down is when you try and use it as a team and you're not able to do that well.
Yeah.
Last thing I'll say on it is, and that it took me a really long time to figure out how useful this was in my logo. But if you look at my logo, there's the top part right there, and there's a bottom part. The top part is like the leadership and the strategy, the accountability, right? And then there's the bottom part is the boots on the ground. And that's the tactical, that is the responsibility, that's the get things done. Every time I found success, there was always two people at the center of it. They were filling those two positions. And the most important part of my logo is the space between them, right? The shape of that space between them tells me a lot about how well they're going to be able to use technology. Is the top, to the side? Are the boots on the ground? Do they have imposter syndrome? And so one of the feet's on the ground and one of them's not. Are they just, is one over here, one over there? Does the boots on the ground have one foot out the door? Are they leaving their job? There's so much that can be told around the shape of the connection of just that small human stack of just two people. And if you take that and you expand it to a whole organization, the shape of the relationships and the connections that we have are the same as interoperability when it comes to technology.
No idea the background on that. So again, for reference of people that might be listening to this, as I see the logo over your shoulder, it looks a little bit like the Eiffel Tower. So for people that are listening are like, okay, what is this logo he's talking about, right? Like that's just a little bit, but maybe you should find your way over to YouTube so you can see what we're talking about. Or obviously your website, which we can learn a lot more about you, the logo and the organization and how you serve our community. But that was fascinating, Tim, because I never really I remember again when you unveiled the logo, but I didn't realize the space between and the importance, right, of how that serves. So I want to segue us into the conversation because I think you have teed it up perfectly, my friend, right? Like leadership, boots on the ground, how much of is that space, user, community, kind of all of that. And so we're diving into overall wellness, health, like how are we as these leaders and the boots on the ground people serve in the sector, navigate the demands of life, right? Professional world, personal world. And as I shared earlier, you and I often share quite personally in professional settings. So I would love to know, like, how do you handle all of the things that you're doing, amazing things in this sector? How do you handle this and balance the personal professional demands?
I don't know that I do it well. I'll just start by saying I'm not sure how well I do it,
Yeah, that's
I
fair.
also feel like I feel like I've got a lot of empathy for myself around that.
Mm,
And so I no longer expect myself to do that well. I'm not shaped that way. I'm not designed for it. I don't like that's just not how my personality is. And the more comfortable I've gotten with that, the more I'm able to realize that for me, balance looks a little bit different than for other people, and to live into that and be kind of comfortable with it. So I've gotten a lot more functional than idealistic about it as I've gotten older and more proficient. And what I found is that actually that's better anyway for me. And I'm not saying other people need to do that, but um, I really work in spurts where I'm into a
yeah.
project for 6 to 8 weeks, and I'm very into that project for 6 to 8 weeks. And then I move on to something else. And I usually have 2 or 3 weeks where I'm just like, oh yeah, I can't even think about anything again.
Yeah.
And that's the rhythm for me. It's not a 24-hour cycle. It's a 6 week on, 2 week off kind of cycle. And so I've relaxed into that. I don't worry about that. That's kind of what I do. And then for me, a lot of balance for me comes from conversations like this and being on site at places like conferences where I'm with my people and I find this liminal space there. I really don't go to events as much to find customers and lead gen as much as I do to engage new content and to find my people and to catch that sense of belonging again. So I'll just start by saying I don't have this figured out, and I'm okay with that.
Hmm. That really hit me in a deep, good place because um I'm right there with you, Tim. Like every time I have seen you at a conference and many of our peers, I love the community. Like I'm not there necessarily to um, gain clients or attract clients or even to take on new information. I'm there to build me as a person, that community, have that support and what that looks like. So, of course, before I hit record, right, you and I were already into some deep, juicy information. And you said some things that I would love for you to repeat, but you mentioned that you were bulletproof. What did you mean by that?
That's a great question. So the context of that is that I share really openly about my mental health struggles and on LinkedIn and social media. And I have a commitment to do that. So about, I don't know, 3 or 4 times a year, depression will win. And I used to just spend so much effort to not let it win. And for me, winning was making me stop working for the day, or to knock me out that way.
Yeah.
And a couple of years ago, what I found was there are different levels of my depression. So I have chronic depression, and I'm insomniac. I have ADD, and when I started working with my depression, things got so much better. So when things hit a threshold for me where I realize that I am better off not trying to push through for the day, I don't
Right.
really fight that. I just say, okay, today depression's winning. I might have really important things scheduled. And it's even more important on those days to stop because I won't do important things well. And it's taken me years to understand that, right? And I've got this routine that I do. It is so unhealthy and it works for me. I go to McDonald's, get a Big Mac, I get 5 barbecue sauces, a large fry, and a shake, and I bring it home and I just watch dumb TV and eat McDonald's. I don't know why that's the winning ticket for me, but it is, and at least I've got one.
That's
So,
right.
and the other thing that I do is before I close out, I write a post on LinkedIn and let people know. And
Mm,
my commitment to that is one of the ways that I handle the amount of privilege I've been given, and that as a CEO, as a white male, I really have a lot of privilege. And I come from it's kind of funny. I grew up poor but privileged. And it took me years to even understand what that meant. But one of the commitments I have to that privilege is to let people know so that I'm normalizing. This is a normal part of our human experience. I am not abnormal. in this. It's just abnormal to say it out loud for everybody to know about it.
Yeah.
But because I'm not going to lose my job, I'm not going to lose clients. And if anything, I get scads and scads of encouragement from it. It is overwhelming how people respond to that. So that's what I mean by I'm bulletproof. That not everybody has that. When I had I had several employees, and this would happen for them as well. It took me a couple of years to realize they can't post that out there because it's a public record. People will see that, and that could affect their job careers for the rest of their lives. So,
Yeah. Thank you. Like, your willingness, your awareness to speak about privilege. I, right alongside you, did not realize how much privilege I had, as a white woman, CEO as well. It's like, hey, I can put that out and say today's not a good day and feel safe. That's something else you and I mentioned. Not everyone has that safety around them. A little bit of a pivot, but I'm really curious how technology, which is the world that you are in and day out, and really we all are, right? The reality is technology is in and around all of us. How has technology, who you are, what you do, right, help and support that balance that you talk about? Or are you seeing that the advancements in technology are actually negatively impacting perhaps that balance? Like, can you talk to us about how that's made its way into that equation?
yeah, that's a tough one. It's a good question. I'm building a course called AI for Anyone right now. It's supposed to have been recorded last week.
Yeah.
And like all things for ADD people, I don't know if you're like this. My dad used to say he was an undiagnosed ADD person. He used to say, I don't work well under pressure, but without it, I don't work at all. And like, I feel like I get to deadline mode and then things click. So here we are in
Mhm.
deadline mode for the course. And it's kind of helpful because I've been thinking about the ethical risks related to AI, which are large. The lack of regulation, the lack of governance, the lack of frameworks, the lack of any realistic tax policy related to an AI wealth stream is a massive question, right? So there are these big questions about AI, and there's a lot of risks to those. But it's here to stay because the benefits are insanely good. The benefits are huge. And I realize our minds want to come up with a yes no on a lot of questions like this. And once things have moved into society, we kind of accept them and move them forward, and we find ways to use them. Money's a great example. Like, money's bad for people, and it's really important as well. I'm an economist and I studied a lot of that, right? So money is an invention that creates enormous efficiency and enormous problems. The internet, for crying out loud, right? Massive efficiencies, huge societal issues related to it. AI is just a new wave of that. So yes, it's good and bad. And some of the ways that it's good and bad fall right into personhood, right? Right into who we are as people. And so my course is aimed at helping people find their agency with AI. And that's what's really important to me, because it's not about just the risks and the benefits or beneficial use. So, it's not just what is AI. It really is about how do I, as an individual, create my agency and understand that. How do I respond to fear of risks and not react to it, right? Once you react, you lose the choice on how you engage it. Or where there are risks that blend with reality and there are things we can't do anything about, how do we advocate but not abdicate, right? How do we research things that are important that we could find, and at the same time not become obsessive with it? So there are these trade-offs that we find in the self-agency that we have that I think are really big questions. And one of the reasons that I'm a good person to ask this of is because I do struggle with that. I do struggle with technology because I'm in it every day, and because TikTok has like totally just got me trained on dopamine and alpha waves, right? So I feel like, yeah, there are parts of this where we need to be really careful, cognizant, and at the same time, that falls under responsible use, so that there's beneficial and responsible use, which allows us to personally minimize risks and maximize benefits.
You give me a lot to think about, Tim. Like I wish this conversation was so much longer, and it could be, right? But as we look at really just the time frame here, fascinating. Tell us where I have another question for you, but as we dive into that, conversation, the course that you just mentioned, where can we find more information about that? Human Stack, Tim Lockie himself, Tadpole database, right? Like, where do we find you?
So thehumanstack.com is where you can find me online. I'm on LinkedIn quite a bit. You know, we are connected on LinkedIn. So if people follow you, they can find me pretty easily. AI for Anyone will be released next week. So so by July 1st, if this airs after July 1st, it's out and you can go to the website and purchase that. It's going to be $99. It'll take 60 minutes. My goal was to create something that was less than $100 and could be done in one sitting. So, and it really is for anyone. I'm creating it so that my mom could take it and really understand what's next and make her own choices about how much to engage.
Yeah, that is super cool. So besides, this is my final question, but besides McDonald's, is there something else that you find helps you, Tim, when things get a little too overwhelming, maybe overstimulated, for all of our listeners? And I've had some of our guests talk about whether it's meditation or taking a retreat, like a solo retreat. I'm a big camper. I love to be out in nature. But when we're feeling that overwhelm, perhaps in life or perhaps in technology, besides the drive-through, what other recommendation do you have? And maybe, it's that recommendation because you found that it works for you.
Yeah, I struggle with routine, but it is actually one of the things that helps me the most. So it took me, I was not diagnosed with ADD or chronic depression until I was 30. So I went through, like, I come from Montana. There's no such thing as depression in Montana, right? So, so it took me a long time to figure it out. There was a real resistance in me to taking medication, even though it was so helpful. I think I went off of it a couple of times and just found things didn't work as well. And I finally realized, wait, I'm addicted to water and I don't really struggle about it. I drink water every day. I don't get like, it's just fine. I don't feel weird about it. This is in that category for me. This is what helps me. And if all it takes is to remember to take that little pill every day, do it. So the first thing I'd say is find what works for you, identify the resistance and why, and then figure out how to push through that resistance. So I found that to be really helpful. Um, I feel like my marriage, my family, I live next to my mom and dad, the connections that I have, even the connections like with you and other friends on LinkedIn really ground me in a sense of belonging that is important to me and keeps me on track. So it's not all just McDonald's. Those are like when it gets too overwhelming. The rest of the time is just kind of rolling through and just accepting this is a harder day, push through it, or this is a better day, enjoy it.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So many of us, I know I've been in the industry 20 plus years, and my journey has, oh my gosh, changed so many times, right? And I love those final words that you shared. Mostly for me is to find your community, right? Like find your people, find the ones that you can connect and ground with. And Tim, you right back at you, my friend. You are one of those that helps to ground me. It is very much of a mirror because you are doing so much amazing greatness in this nonprofit sector.
Thank you.
And as we look at self-care, burnout, overwhelm, the constant demands, right? I just want to say thank you for joining, and everyone that, enjoyed our conversation, check out Tim, check out this course because it is out by the time you're listening to this now, and we've got some good information. So Tim, thanks for joining me, my friend.
Jared, thanks for making this a priority and having these conversations.